Pop quiz. What's the most popular Dodge of them all? If you answered Charger, you're correct. On this episode of Roadkill's Junkyard Gold, we're at Stephen's Performance charting the evolution of the mighty Dodge Charger. I'm Steve Mignonti, hot rod historian, author, and lover of all things cars. I travel all across the country to uncover the forgotten and hidden gems of the automotive world. This is Roadkill's Junkyard Gold. We're in Anderson, Alabama at Stephen's Performance, an all-Mopar yard with over 3,000 cars spread out over 58 acres. On this episode of Roadkill's Junkyard Gold, we're exploring the evolution of the Dodge Charger. When the Charger arrived in 1966, it totally transformed Dodge's image from makers of practical transportation to leaders in the muscle car field, something that continues to this day. '70 Plymouth Satellite or Belvedere four-door. '69 Charger, gotta love it. Hideaway headlights are gone, but there's no mistaking a Charger. F-code, 318 two-barrel, not a performance model. 1969 Charger. 1970 Roadrunner in Citron Yellow. What are you doing in the junkyard? Oh, here it is, man. That fastback body is unmistakable. This is the beginning of the Dodge Charger dynasty. It's a 1966. And this is actually the first Chrysler product since the 1942 DeSoto with standard hideaway headlamps. They're pretty elaborate pieces. Big die castings with electric motors that rotate in and out of position. And while the Charger was based on the Dodge Coronet, its base price of $3,122 was $418 more than the Coronet, which makes it, in today's dollars, about $4,000 more. So there was a lot of unique stuff baked into every Charger, more than just that roof. There were 4 possible engines under the hood of a '66 Charger. None was a 6-banger. It began with the 318 Poly with a 2-barrel, moving up to the 361 Big Block with a 2-barrel. Above that, 383 4-barrel, and at the very peak, the 426 Street Hemi. What have we got here? Drum roll, please. Give me a Hemi. Okay, no Hemi, but we do have the Hemi radiator. This is the 26-inch wide unit with 3 rows of cores, and this is because this has air conditioning, but this one is the 383 4-barrel. I see the AFB. This is made by Carter, and AFB stands for aluminum 4-barrel. Now, this one's very original. It has the original tag on it, 4130S, which is the part number for this carburetor when used on a 383 in a Charger with an automatic. Something kind of cool, too, is the unsilenced air cleaner, this thing right here, which was first seen in 1962 on 361s, and in 1966 or so, also was used on slant 6s. But again, with a different base plate to suit the 4-barrel, this unsilenced air cleaner is correct to this car. Something I see that I'm not too crazy about is the optional air conditioning. Now, the fastback roof on Charger does become kind of a greenhouse on hot days. It gets pretty hot, so a lot of these cars were ordered with air conditioners. The only downside is Chrysler's air conditioning unit was kind of big. This is a cast iron V-twin with pistons, and it's basically like a miniature Harley-Davidson engine, except it's driven by a pulley and not gasoline. By contrast, General Motors cars use something called the A6, a Frigidaire unit, which was actually a cylindrical piece with 6 swish plates, which served as the pistons inside of this. But it was lighter, smaller, quieter, and didn't use as much horsepower as this V-twin pump that Chrysler used did. So this thing here adds probably 70 pounds to the nose of the car, and it draws, 10, 15 horsepower when it's being used on a hot summer day. Now, this car does have manual drum brakes, and keep in mind the power booster was an option, but this will have drum brakes only in '66. '67, the disc brakes finally made the option sheet on Dodge Charger, but this car will have 10-inch drums up front. Okay, inside the Dodge Charger is a feast for the eyes. Let's check that out. Inside, every Charger came with an electroluminescent instrument panel. Now, on the front, we see that the standard gauges here, including a tachometer, which was standard on Charger, even a 318 2-barrel. But on the backside of this, there are no light bulbs, except for the ones for the blinkers. But ordinarily, these gauges are illuminated by small bulbs, like on a Coronet or a lesser Dodge. Not here. Instead, the electroluminescent system uses radioactive paint, which is excited by an amplifier to glow at night, kind of like a wristwatch, but very crisp, very clear, and an excellent touch, and standard on all Chargers. But the only downside to it was, on cars with automatic transmissions right here, The indicator was also electroluminescent, and here's the unit right here. There's no bulb. If you spilled a drink on that, you could short the system out, which got to be kind of expensive. And of course, all Chargers in 66 and 7 came with bucket seats up front, and in 66, bucket seats in the back and a full-length console. Another detail we see for 66 only is this steering column, which is non-collapsible. For 1967, it would have a waffle effect here, so that if the steering box was hit up front with force, it would collapse rather than sending the steering column into the car. But the real story of Charger is its fastback body. Charger wasn't Chrysler's first fastback. That would have been the Plymouth Barracuda of 1964. But what Dodge did with the fastback Charger was base it on the Coronet B-body midsize platform. That way, it wouldn't steal sales from the compact A-body Barracuda. While the Charger shares the Coronet's 117-inch wheelbase and B-body platform, it's almost totally unique. It does share the hood, fenders, and door skins, but otherwise, the roof, rear quarter panels, and trunk are totally unique to Charger. And in fact, the Charger's rear wheel openings are full-size versus the semi-skirted wheel openings seen on the backs of Coronets. Of course, the big glass window here does generate some heat, so all Chargers have these rubber vents here, which allow heat to escape, and when you're going down the road and have the vent windows open, the air flows right through here and keeps the interior nice and cool. Of course, the trunk lid is smaller and narrower than a Coronet, which was a much larger piece of metal, and Chargers do have a unique fold-down load floor, so you can put plywood and long bits of cargo in the back of the Charger, as long as it fits underneath this panel. And a finishing touch seen on all Chargers is a full-width red taillight with the word Charger in metal letters going all the way across. It's missing on this car, but from the front or the back, you couldn't miss a Charger coming down the road. Now, Charger sales were 37,300 units in 1966, but unfortunately, the public didn't quite get it. For 1967, sales tumbled to 15,788 units, just about 50%. So Chrysler did a rethink for 68. We'll talk about that a little later on. But these Chargers are amazing cars, and in my book, as the first Chargers, this one deserves to be, well, modified. I think what I do is get a Hellefant 1,000 horsepower crate motor from Mopar Performance, back it up with a TorqueFlite 8, and I'd grab a brand new Charger independent rear suspension. It would go right underneath that flat load floor. And then I'd put some Demon 17-inch wheels with Nitto drag radials all the way around and give this retro Charger a modern spin. 1969 Charger, and a 71 Plymouth Roadrunner. See the logo on the dashboard. 71 was the all-new year for the fuselage body, and probably a 383 car. Oh, look at, what is this? Okay, this is the 383 sticker on the front fender, and it is upside down. That looks to be very original. That's not a reproduction piece. That's ancient, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if that was applied at the factory. Belvidere, Illinois, Lynch Road, and Hamtramck, Michigan, those factories where they built these cars were, well, not known for quality control. In fact, Chrysler never really had a great reputation at this point in time for quality control. So I would not be surprised if this upside-down sticker was applied at the factory and either not noticed by the buyer, or maybe they had a sense of humor and decided to keep it. That is weird. Ah, yeah. Second-gen Charger, 1969, and it's an RT. That, of course, means we're looking at the muscle car version. And in the case of this 1969 Charger RT, this would have had either a 440 or the Hemi under the hood. Now, this is a great example of the second-generation Charger, which arrived in 1968. Unfortunately, the first-gen 66 and 67 fastbacks didn't sell very well. So Dodge went back to the drawing board and came up with what they call the Coke bottle styling, made famous by the Dukes of Hazzard, Steve McQueen and Bullitt, and any number of heroes on the drag strip and streets all over the country. Now, these cars arguably are more popular than the fastbacks, and I get it. But at the same time, when Dodge restyled these cars, they also decontented them. The price dropped by $114 from 67 fastback to the 68 Coke bottle car, and part of that came down to replacing a lot of the metal parts with plastic. Great example is the grille. Charger still had standard hideaway headlights, but instead of the big metal canisters with electric motors, they decontented them to fixed headlights with plastic doors that open and close. The headlight doors are operated by vacuum motors, and we see on the firewall a hole with those rubber lines which come from the headlight switch to the vacuum motor. For 1970, Dodge went to electric motors, and that hole went away. So a little spotter's guide for the Junkyard. Now, this one, being an RT, does have the standard front sway bar, still here. Big torsion bars on this one, .92s instead of the .88s used on small block and 383 cars. And we also see this one has S77 power steering for an even $100. And something I'm not so high on myself is the H51 air conditioning unit for $357. Now, you couldn't get the air conditioning with the Hemi, so we know this car was born a 440. Brakes on Chargers came in one of three sizes. Let's take a look. Okay. Standard Chargers came with 10 by 2-inch front drums. That would be cars with the 318 or the 383 2-barrel or 4-barrel. But for the extra $352 you paid for the RT, you graduated to 11 by 3-inch front drum brakes. Now, if you look at the construction of these brakes, they're actually a one-piece casting versus the multi-piece stampings that are welded together on the 10-inch drums. So these heavy-duty brakes are also known as police brakes, and being a one-piece casting, they're less prone to heat warping, and are actually much better than the 10-inch drums seen on base cars. But for an additional $50.51, this car was born with B51 power disc brakes up front, and these are the ultimate front brakes on a Charger. Now, proving this is an RT comes down to the VIN. To verify an RT muscle car, we want to see XS29. We got it here. Basic Chargers read XP29. And in the fifth spot, L marks the 440 Magnum. If we saw a J there, we'd be striking some gold with the 426 Street Hemi. Another area where we see decontenting on the Gen 2 Charger is the instrument cluster. Unlike the electroluminescent system we saw on the 66 and the metal face, for 68 up, they went to bulbs once again and plastic fascias on the dashboard. This one does have something pretty cool. This is the N85 Tick-Tock Tack, which cost $50.15. Essentially, in a left-hand pod, you got a 6,000 RPM tachometer with a clock built in. And like the first generation Charger, the second gen Charger came standard with front bucket seats, but the center console was now relegated to optional status. This one did have it. I see remains of the brackets on the drive shaft tunnel, so this car once had buckets and a floor shifted automatic. Here's the original steering column, which included collapsible technology, and it probably saved a few lives. Well, as much as Dodge decontented the interior and the details of the Charger, they really got the body right. Folks call this the Coke bottle style, with these kind of hips in the back that really emphasize the rear wheel openings and give the car a ready-to-pounce kind of a look. But this one, being an RT and not a Daytona or a Charger 500, has the tunneled flying buttress type rear window. It looks great, but again, not so great on NASCAR super speedways. The biggest gimmick of all was this gas cap. Instead of a basic filler, they came up with this, the pop top. Essentially, it's a hinged cap with a trim piece and a hole stamped into the top of the quarter panel. This one detail right here, for a small investment, got more people talking about the Gen 2 Charger than all of the unique features of the first generation Charger combined. This thing right here helped make the Charger a star. Now, this one, being an RT, does have the tail stripe. We can see here where the remnants of it have faded away into history. But if you didn't want the RT stripe, you could go with the option V88, which eliminated the stripe and gave you a lower profile. But Dodge replaced the stripe with an RT emblem, a metal emblem, right here on the quarter panel. But again, the Charger RT, the Coronet RT, the Super Bee, and the Dodge Dart GTS were all members of the Dodge Scat Pack, the cars with the bumblebee stripes, seen right here. Now, the axle on the ground here is an 8 3/4, and this would have been the axle that would have come with the 440 automatic. If this car had the 4-speed, you would have had a Dana 60 rear axle here with a bigger 9 3/4-inch ring gear, and all of them were built with Sure Grip, which essentially was Chrysler's term for pause traction. Both tires would turn when you hit the gas. But on the 8 3/4 axle, this one here in the RT, you paid an additional $42.35 for the D91 Sure Grip. In other words, pause traction was not standard on RTs. You paid money for it. One thing that's kind of cool here is we get a look at the RT springs. They're asymmetrical, meaning that the right-hand spring has 5 leaves plus 2 half leaves to stiffen the front half of the spring, acting like a traction bar. The left spring, the driver's side, has 6 leaves, and it's not asymmetrical. The idea is that when you hit the gas, the rear axle wants to lift the right rear tire. The extra half leaves on the right-hand side counter that, and both tires grip evenly, seen only on RT models. In 1969, 85,680 Chargers were built. Of them, just 19,298 were RTs with the 440 or the Hemi. That's a big number, and it's a small number. In my book, this is a special car which deserves to be restored. So I think what I'd do is I'd find another 440 Magnum. I wouldn't worry about numbers matching status, but I'd back it up with a Torque Flight automatic transmission, put some 355 gears in that 8 3/4, make it a Sure Grip, and then I'd round it off with a set of W21 5-spoke Magnum 500 wheels. Now keep in mind, a lot of guys like to run the rally wheels with the 10 holes, but they didn't arrive until 1970, so they'd be incorrect for this 1969 Charger RT. But it's a special car and a great example of the second generation Dodge Charger. The funny thing about Charger is that from 1966 through 1970, there was no functional cold air hood. By contrast, across the hall over at Plymouth Roadrunner, 1969 brought something called the N96 air grabber hood. The first version is seen here. When you see mesh grills instead of the plastic vents on top of the hood, you know you're looking at a functional cold air hood. For $55.30, this setup had a fiberglass box underneath, which encircled an orange oval air cleaner and brought cold air to the 383 or the Hemi in the Roadrunner or the 440 in the GTX. In 1970, Plymouth changed things up. The hood was flat with a power dome in the middle, but when N96 air grabber was ordered, you got this, an opening door which opened up with a vacuum motor to suck in cold air to feed the engine, but around town, it lay flat like a sleeper. The price on this was $65.55, about $10 more than the simpler 1969 setup. But here's the irony. From 1966 through 1970, the Dodge didn't have a functional cold air hood. That wouldn't arrive until 1971. Go figure. Very cool. A couple of third-generation Chargers. These arrived on the scene in 1971 and were built between 71 and 74. And unlike the 68 through 70 Coke bottle or flying buttress style, these are known as the fuselage style body. The wheelbase shrank from 117 to 115 inches, and these Chargers were pretty popular, although they were built at the declining days of the muscle car boom. But on this one, I do see the louvered taillights and the blacked out trunk telling us this is a Rallye. And the Rallye was introduced in 72 to replace the RT and the Super B of 1971. And in 72, the Rallye was the hot dog, the big one. And something I see here too, it's pretty cool, are the N42 decorative exhaust tips. These cost all of $22.95, and these were first seen on 1971 Hemi cars, six-pack cars, but they're a very cool indicator that under the hood is something bigger and badder than the 318 two-barrel, which would have had just a single exhaust pipe and no adorned tips. But those are cool. It's amazing they're still here. Now, we'll find out what's under the hood on this one in a minute, but something we see here is the gas cap. As Dodge simplified the Charger for 71 through 74, the pop-top gas cap went away, and in its place, the gas cap was hidden by the license plate, as we see right here. Now, with these dual exhausts, we could be looking at something as hot as a 446-pack. Two of those were built in 1972. Is this one of them? Well, we go inside to find out what transmission backs up this V8, and we'll learn more. Give me a pistol grip 4-speed. Okay, no pistol grip. This one has the column shifted automatic, the least exciting of them all, but that's okay. The 727 is a great transmission. What we don't see in this car is bucket seats. The third generation Charger from 71 through 74 is the first one not to offer standard front bucket seats. Also, the center console was an extra cost option, so this one here is the base interior. Although it does have something cool. This here is the S84 Tough Wheel. For an extra $31, you got this. This first appeared in the 1970 Challenger and Barracuda. It's a smaller diameter wheel with a cushioned leather-ish grip and aluminum spokes and a center-mounted horn button. Nice to see it in this car. Now, being a Rallye, I also do see the standard issue Rallye instrument cluster with a 150-mile-an-hour speedometer and gauges for oil pressure, fuel, alternator, and temperature. The standard Charger instrument cluster would have idiot lights and a horizontal ribbon speedometer that only read to 120 miles per hour. So again, it's a little bit optimistic, but nice to see the idea, anyways, of 150 miles per hour in this car. Now, the engine in this car could be one of a few. Being a Rallye, this will have a V8 for sure. No slant sixes in the Rallies, but it'll be a 318, a 340, a 360, or a 400, or a 440. Let's go see. Okay, well, this kind of gives it away. 340 Magnum, so I'm going to guess, yes, this is a 340 car. And the domed hood we see on this one is part of the Rallye package, as are the hash marks on the doors. Again, special stuff only seen on Rallies. Now, one thing you could not get after 1971 on a Charger was the Ram Air hood scoop. Gone in 72 and 73 and 74. But a cool piece this hood is. Okay, let's open her up and see if that 340 is still there. Yeah, there it is. Okay. Now, the thing about the 340 is that it was originally designed for 1968 for use in A-bodies, Dodge Darts, Plymouth Barracudas, smaller, lighter cars. It's not a lot of torque, not a lot of cubic inches, so when you put this smaller engine into the 72 Charger, which is a bigger vehicle, well, the power-to-weight ratio isn't that good. But the good thing about the 340 is that it generally skirted the insurance surcharges that would have hammered buyers of this car who were younger and bought the car with the 440 or the 400. So the 340 was a good little engine. Now, it made 240 horsepower, which is a full 90 horsepower more than the base 318, which made 150. The difference between them was a hotter camshaft, a 4-barrel thermoquad carburetor, and large valve, large port cylinder heads. Now, this one here is very original looking. The engine's blue, but the air cleaner is orange. What's that about? Well, that's the correct presentation. But the 340 was a great little engine. It cost all of $209.70 more than the 318, and that is why we saw the dual exhaust on this car. Now, one thing we don't see on this car is the hidden headlights. In fact, the third generation Charger was the first Charger not to come standard with hideaway headlights. You paid extra. As mundane as the 72 Charger was, a lot of them sold. In fact, a total of 75,594 people bought 72 Chargers, but of them, only 4,531 were rally performance models. That makes this a pretty rare car. But the downside is it's a 340 automatic on the column, so it's not that compelling. If it was a 400 four-speed car, well, we'd have to restore it back to factory stock. But I think what I do with this one is pay tribute to the fact that 1972 was the year that NASCAR king Richard Petty abandoned his Plymouth Roadrunner and went into a 1972 Dodge Charger. So I think what I do is do a replica of Richard Petty's Charger right down to the STP sponsorship that he picked up when Plymouth got out of NASCAR racing. So paint it blue, paint it a little bit of red, put a 43 on the side, put a big 440 under the hood, big wheels and tires, and turn it into a street-going replica of King Richard Petty's NASCAR stalker. Of the many little details that separate Chargers from Chargers, the rear side marker lights are one of them. In 1968, Chargers had a little circle, 69 and 70, a rectangular marker that would have been in this hole right here. When the third generation Charger came out in 71, we see this body-colored dual horizontal affair. This was used for 1 year only. When the third generation Charger went to 1972, that was replaced by a surface-mounted rectangular plastic lens that went right here. And these were used on other Mopars from 1972 onward. So there are lots of little details that separate one Charger from another. Coronet RT with the original aqua paint and the bumblebee stripe still in place. 67 Satellite, four headlights. 66 Belvedere with 2 headlights, 69 or so Charger, 79 Dodge Magnum. This is the final stop for the B-body platform. And this, wow, this is a 77 Dodge Charger SE. Now, the Charger 4th generation appeared in 1975 and was kind of schizophrenic. There were 2 versions. The basic Charger had a squarish body with a square grille, which was shared with the Plymouth Fury. Well, the Charger SE, which was also sold in 1975, is what we see here. Now, the SE shared its body with the Chrysler Cordova, which was kind of an interpretation of the 1973 Chevy Monte Carlo, which at that point in time was the leading car in the personal luxury field. And speaking of personal luxury, the Gen 4 Charger, as we see here from 75 through 78, went from being a muscle car in 71 through 74, the fuselage styling, to much more of a personal luxury vehicle. We see the headlights here are big and round, just like the Cordova, and yeah, the 73 Monte Carlo, which these cars aped in a big way. Now, the fiberglass construction here is starting to come through. By this point in time, fiberglass was being used for fascias, was lighter and cheaper to make, and also the complex shapes we see here, if done in steel, would require welding, multiple stampings, and a lot of time. So this was cheaper and allowed better styling. Under the hood, I like this, the distributor's on the front, which means we have a big block. Standard engine in Charger would have been a 318 two-barrel, followed by the 360 two-barrel small block or the 360 four-barrel small block. But for me, I need a big block, and here it is. Now, 1977 would have been a 400. No 440s and Chargers after 1974. But this is the big dog, as good as it got in 1977. This engine has 190 horsepower, 305 foot-pounds of torque, and was born with a thermoquad carburetor and something called the lean burn system. We got it here. Now, lean burn arrived in 1976 and was used through 1989 on most every Chrysler V8 engine. And what it is basically is a computer mounted on the air cleaner housing, which took inputs from 8 sensors to dial up the ideal ignition curve for reduced emissions and improved fuel economy. The downside is that the unit was located on the air cleaner, where it was exposed to heat and vibration, 2 things that kill electronics. So a lot of folks say that if the lean burn unit, the computer, was located on the firewall of the inner fender, it might not have failed as often as it did. Now, looking at the crankshaft on this one, I do see an eccentric, which means this is a cast crank 400. 400 grew out of the 383 in 1972, same stroke, but a larger bore. And all of them pretty much have a cast crank, which means the crank is lighter and it needed eccentric mass on the front and the back of the crank, and we have it right here. The downside of this cast crank is that it's not as strong as the forged crank used in earlier 383s, and drag racers usually break these things at about 500 horsepower or with nitrous. But if you stay below those numbers and away from nitrous, the cast crank 400 is a pretty good engine for hop-ups. Let's look inside and check the transmission. All 4th generation 75 through 78 Charger SEs came standard with bucket seats and a console, something the 2nd and 3rd generation Chargers made you pay extra for. Now, this interior is very similar to the one used in the Chrysler Cordova, but it doesn't have the rich Corinthian leather that Ricardo Montalban used to brag about on TV. This one has vinyl and cloth, although you could get optional leather. This one also has manual windows. You could get power windows if you wanted to, and you could actually build the base price of $5,089, close to $9,000 if you loaded one of these cars out. This one's pretty well appointed. AM/FM radio, of course, power steering, power brakes, air conditioning. And here we have the automatic transmission, what was once called the slapstick transmission shifter. This arrived in 1970 aboard the Challenger E-Body, and then it arrived in 1971 aboard the 3rd generation Dodge Charger. The idea behind the slapstick is that there's a mechanical detente inside of the shifter that allows you to hit the shifter from 1st to 2nd, 2nd to 3rd at 6,000 RPM without risk of going into neutral or drive and ruining the pass. And back in the day, the word slapstick was actually marked into the lens here on the shifter indicator. By 1977, performance was a dirty word and the slapstick word was eliminated, but fear not, the same detente mechanism inside of here was also used in the 1971 Hemi Charger. The 4th generation Charger from 75 through 78 was the first one to abandon any semblance of a fastback roof. Instead, it got the classic 70s formal roof with opera windows, but again, it was aping the look of the 73 Chevy Monte Carlo, which was the leader in the class. Another detail that Dodge copied from General Motors and those Monte Carlos was the polycast wheel concept. But instead of a harder plastic, Chrysler utilized a softer rubber on the 36 fins we see here. That's not aluminum, and these puppies are easily flexed, and that's a 15 by 6 inch wheel. This cost $120 more than the basic full wheel cover that was standard on the Charger SC in 1977. If this car were mine, I think what I would do is pretend the 70s and the OPEC fuel crisis never happened. Let's build this to a what-if 1977 Hemi Charger with a 426 Street Hemi, dual quads, Ram Charger hood, pistol grip 4-speed, Dana 60, and some 15 by 7 rally wheels. Let's build it into the Charger it should have been. Well, that's our show from Stevens Performance in Anderson, Alabama. We saw the evolution of the Charger, the 1966 Charger debut edition with that exotic fastback and 4-seat bucket seat interior got things started. The 69 Charger RT, with its 440 cubic inches, was 10% larger than GM muscle cars, and the 72 Charger Rallye 340 beat the insurance racket with its small block power plant. 1977 brought the Charger SC 400, which sold nearly 76,000 units, a near record for Dodge Charger sales. It was the right car for the time. And the Charger Stampede continues to this day. The 707 horsepower Hellcat Charger is a legend in its own time. We're not done here at Stevens Performance. We'll be back to see even more great Mopars on a future episode of Roadkill's Junkyard Gold. Until then, hasta mañana.